All right, folks, welcome to this year's Social Science Festival with the theme of community. This is our second presentation of the festival. We had one a little bit earlier this morning for those of you that might have attended. This one has to do with mental health and the importance of the theme of community in mental health. Our presenter is actually in Los Angeles, California. Because of time difference, etc., uh, Stephanie Gilbert, who is a licensed therapist, who has a very keen interest in community as they relate to issues of mental health, right, decided to give us a pre-recorded presentation, right? So we're going to listen to her pre-recorded presentation, but at the end of it, Stephanie is going to join us, and she will be ready to field any questions that you might have in the question and answer portion of the talk, right? So I'm going to share my screen now and get her presentation started.
Hello, my name is Stephanie Gilbert, and I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist from Los Angeles, California, in the United States. I currently work as a therapist in private practice, but I've worked in a variety of settings in the past, including community mental health, as well as several treatment programs. I work with such issues as eating disorders and disordered eating, obsessive compulsive disorder, anxiety disorders, and depressive disorders. A topic I am passionate about is the topic of my talk today, which is the importance of community and mental health. And first, just let me say that I am so excited to be able to be a part of your school community in this way. I'm grateful to be able to talk about community and how important it is to mental health. And I'd also like to take this opportunity to say thank you for all of those who have worked so hard to put on this event. I'm honored to be a part of your school community. So first, let's start with defining exactly what I'll be sharing about today. In this talk, I'll be using the terms mental health as well as community. Now, mental health is defined as a person's psychological and emotional well-being. Everyone has mental health, much like everyone has physical health. And therefore, we all have an interest in maintaining our mental health. So for our purposes today, we are talking about taking care of everyone's psychological and emotional well-being, or mental health. Now, the second term, community, simply refers to a group of people who have something in common. It's a broad term, and we're not basing communities on geographical locations. So for instance, today, when I reference now being a part of your school community by presenting this talk, I am joining your community and sharing via the internet. Other types of community might be coming together to cheer on the same sports team, or connecting in a recovery community, such as a 12-step program. Perhaps joining a book club, which is actually one way I've created more community for myself during this time. I joined a friend's book club, and we now meet online every so often. So there are so many ways to create community, and I've actually ended this talk today by giving you a few ideas on how you might find community if that's something you're interested in. First though, let's take a look at why community is important to mental health. So, taking into account that everyone has mental health or emotional well-being and would theoretically be interested in how to maintain their mental health, then how do we do that? Well, one area would be to join and maintain being a part of community. Now, I know some of us might be thinking a question that I have been asked about in the past, which is, why should I be concerned with community if I'm more of an independent or introverted person. And to that, I'd make 2 points. So the first would be that there is no one size fits all community. Different people connect in different ways, and that includes some people who prefer to spend a lot of time in community and some people who prefer to spend significantly less time. Similarly to some people who prefer to have large friend groups and some people who prefer to have smaller friend groups. So whether you are more extroverted or more introverted, there are communities out there for you. Being independent or introverted doesn't necessarily mean we want to or have to be isolated. And the second reason I would point out is that this idea that we are all interdependent, which means we do in reality depend on each other in a variety of ways and are therefore meant to be in community. This can look different for different people, but now perhaps I can use myself as an example again. So, as I'm recording this, I am technically physically alone. Now, I am recording this for your school community, remember? But as far as thinking about how I am interdependent right now, currently, I am depending on others that are keeping my electricity working. I am also depending on others who are keeping my internet working. And say, for example, if I after this want to go and purchase food, I'm also depending on other people that are supplying food from the farms to my grocery store shelves and everyone in between who are working so hard for me to be able to get those groceries. So those are just a few ways. There are countless ways we are interdependent. And it would be extremely difficult to live completely 100% independently. We as humans benefit from other people's contributions, and we would therefore benefit from community. So now, let's take a look at what community can provide us. So I've got 3 examples of what community can provide. The first one being a sense of belonging. We as humans value a sense of belonging. If you've ever felt like you don't fit in, you know it can be a lonely experience. Belonging is different than conforming, I'd like to point out, to be a part of a group. A true sense of belonging includes the ability to be who you are in the communities you choose. You are embraced and appreciated for your unique qualities. The second thing community can provide is support. Community can provide you people to turn to when you need something. Having people to call on when you need to talk or help with something can make all the difference when getting through difficult situations. Having people around to celebrate in good times is also important as well. Having support can help you feel cared for and safe. And knowing that there are people who support you can also benefit your overall outlook in life. The third thing community can provide us, in addition to belonging and support, is purpose. When we think about community, people fulfill different roles. Everyone has different strengths. And when we're in community, different strengths can complement each other. In community, we have the opportunity to use our strengths, giving us purpose. Perhaps you're the person people come to when they need to talk. Or perhaps you're the person who cooks for your friends who are sick. Having a purpose also helps give meaning to our lives. And through community, you can gain purpose. So let's do a quick recap before we go on. The three things community can provide us is belonging, support, and purpose. And think about for a moment in terms of your mental health. Would you benefit from feeling like you belonged, were supported, and had purpose? I know my mental health benefits from all of those things. So now that we have an idea of what community can provide, the second question is, where can we find it? It can feel a bit overwhelming to start if this is something you're faced with. So I've also broken down how to find community using some different ideas. The first idea that you might think about when you're looking to find community is thinking about your interests. What do you enjoy? What are your hobbies? What would you like to learn? The possibilities are really endless. And as you identify your interests, you can begin to think about finding others with similar interests. The second way you might find community is thinking about your values. So, what's important to you? Perhaps learning is a value of yours, as now we are in a school community setting. And after graduation, you can continue to learn in a variety of settings and communities. Perhaps you value health, or you value work, or perhaps family is a value of yours. Another example I might pull from my own experience is since starting this quarantine, a community activity I've started around the value of family is having a family game night via Zoom. We're all coordinating our schedules. So, my family on the East Coast of the US, and my family in Australia, and my family in Japan all get together and play games once a week. It's been a really nice time to have some fun and also catch up with family and check in on how everyone's doing. It's also helped me feel more connected to my family during a time when most travel is just not possible. So, this is an example of how we value or how I value family, and it has inspired me to create more community. Perhaps you can do the same. The third way you might find community is thinking about your beliefs. So, something that comes to my mind when I think about this community is if a person identifies with a particular spiritual or religious belief. Perhaps you can attend an introductory course on the topic, or a speaking engagement of something you believe in, or attend a weekly service. Or perhaps there's a cause that you can join and work together towards a common goal. Connecting with something bigger than you is another way to broaden your community. We are, as humans, meant to connect. Feeling accepted for who you are can also increase our self-worth and benefit our emotional health. Feeling a sense of belonging, feeling supported, and feeling a sense of purpose can add to our overall mental health. And these qualities can all be found in community. So if you're struggling to find community, you might start with some self-reflection. Ask yourself about some of the ideas I've mentioned earlier. So, what are you interested in? What do you value? What do you believe in? From there, you can think about where you might find others And remember that online resources are more plentiful and popular than ever. One last idea I'd like to mention before I end today is this idea that we impact each other. So when you enter into community, you are also supporting others as part of their community. And we all need each other. I truly appreciate everyone who's taken the time to listen. And I encourage you to now think more about the communities you're a part of. Think about the qualities your communities are providing you. And also think about your impact on others as well. Perhaps think about where else you might find community if you feel like it's lacking. It is out there. And even if we are not sharing the same physical space right now, there are ways to connect. There is no better time to start than now. Thank you.
All right. So now Stephanie's presentation is over. Stephanie's actually joined us live from California, where I'm sure the weather is much nicer than what we have here today. We've got like a overcast, cloudy, 13, 14 degrees, you know. So I'm sure you're in much better climate conditions, Stephanie, but thank you for that presentation. So attendees, now's the time for you to get your questions to Stephanie about community mental health or presentation, more general questions about the area or the subject, right? I know that Stephanie's enthusiastic and excited to be with us and ready to answer any queries or any questions you might have. So please, I encourage you, you have to pass through the Q&A feature, right? There's a question and answer feature. So unfortunately, there's no camera or voice that we can enable, but you could just jot down your questions real quickly, and I'm gonna read them out to Stephanie so that she can provide us any answers to the questions you may have. So I'm not seeing anybody yet give us any questions. I know there's at least 50 or so of you attending. Please, I encourage you now, to give us a few questions. Stephanie, I don't know if you want to say a few words in the meantime.
Sure. I would love to say first, thank you for having me today. I really enjoy the topic. It's one that I'm passionate about, especially in terms of mental health. So I'm really excited to be able to, well, virtually, I guess, have your questions. I can't necessarily see you, but it's good to be here on this. It's a little bit warmer, you're right, in LA than where you all are, but it's also a little bit earlier. So we're still kind of overcast
All right.
this morning.
Well, we do have one question that's come in. So here we go. First attendee is asking Stephanie, how can we find a loving and caring community?
Ooh, that is a great question. I think it is, well, I know it's different for every person, but I think it goes back to connecting with values and finding also a purpose in community. But I think ultimately, no matter where you look, if it's, a spiritual community or a school community or a club or an interest that we're connecting to, I think it comes down to connecting to individuals on kind of a group level and finding people that provide you a sense of community and vice versa, you're supporting them too. So I think that's the key when we're finding a loving and caring community, that we're giving that love and care and we're receiving that love and care.
All right, thank you. First, the second question is actually a little bit more career orientation
Yeah,
help, I guess, you know.
yeah.
So somebody in our crowd is asking you, what steps did you have to take to become a licensed therapist education-wise?
Okay, so our in the United States, it's a state by state license. So I'll share what I did in California. So in California, I did after I graduated high school, I did 4 years to get my bachelor's, and then I went on to a master's degree, and I got a 2-year master's degree in clinical psychology. And then after that, I did 3,000 clinical hours of training in which you register with the state of California and you are supervised as a therapist. And then after that, I passed 2 tests, a law and ethics, and then a larger exam to get my license. So after that short process,
Oh, it sounds almost as arduous as passing a bar and becoming a lawyer, you know?
a
Anyways,
little bit, a
yeah.
little bit.
Yep. All right. So next on deck, all right.
Yeah.
A general order question. What are signs of good or bad mental health?
Ooh, I think, well, when we're looking at good or bad mental health, so to speak, I'm thinking of symptoms probably, and if symptoms are impacting your daily level of functioning. So no matter what you're going through, are you able to participate in community? Are you able to go to your job? Are you able to go to school? Are you able to spend quality time and feel like you're enjoying yourself with your friends and family? Versus are you feeling more like isolating all the time, or feeling like staying in bed, or maybe you're not sleeping? So we're looking at the overall functioning of a person. And if you think there's an issue, I would say seek help then. You don't have to wait. That's the other thing I would say for mental health.
Perfect. All right. So here's a good one. What can we do if we do not feel like we are fitting in
Mhm.
into our community, but because we fear loneliness, we stick to it?
That's interesting. I would say when this comes up, I would encourage the person to both look at the community they're a part of and also look at kind of what's going on within themselves too. Because there may be an issue with the community and it's not aligning with maybe your values or purpose, or it's not feeling supportive, and that is a time to look for other communities, or possibly the feelings are coming from the person themselves. Um, but I often get the question because people tend to fear, myself included, being alone, right? But really conforming to fit into a group, we think that that's the thing, you think that being alone is worse, but possibly, and you can get some support in this area, but possibly being alone isn't as scary as we think it is. And possibly it gives us an opportunity to find other people in our lives.
Thank you. All right. Here's another good one. How do you remove yourself from a negative community without hurting anyone?
Yeah. I think it comes down to what I would say was we would be talking about communication. So depending on what type of community it is, how can you leave? Sometimes it's a conversation explaining, using I statements. I'm still a therapist, so I would use the I feel this way versus you make me. Um, Sometimes it's not appropriate to have a conversation with people in person or via Zoom, depending on the negativity. So choosing, and you can ask for some feedback from people you trust too, choosing a way that allows you to move on and them to move on.
Okay. So next, for people that are getting annoyed by their family members daily, do you have any suggestions to help cope with this? Like if we all have to constantly see each other all the time?
Yeah, that's a hard one, especially right now with, I'm sure you all are quarantining. I don't know. We're still under a pretty strict quarantine in Los Angeles. I I'm a firm believer is you need to process somewhere outside of the family So if you have a therapist, it's a good time to talk about those feelings rather than have them play out in the family dynamics themselves. If you can find things to do even by yourself in the house, that can be really helpful. Getting some space, and also knowing that this is a particularly stressful time, and we are all probably at one time or another getting on each other's nerves a little bit. So finding some, maybe listening to music, doing a puzzle, doing something that you can feel a little bit more like you've got a little bit of space, even if you're still in the same room or in the same rooms.
Perfect, thank you. Right, I'm sure this is one of my students because it's a question related to international politics, because I teach
Yeah.
an international politics class,
Yeah.
right? So the person's asking, how does community play a role in international politics more generally? I don't know if you want to field this one, or you know, if you want me to sort of offer the person a little bit of guidance after you field it. It's up to you.
Why don't you offer a little bit of guidance and then maybe
Yeah.
I'll jump in, because this is a big
Well,
question.
you know, community does play a big role in international politics, right? The fact that you guys are here in international politics class listening to Stephanie's presentation is more because we're living a particularly trying time right now for most people. And so even if it doesn't have direct bearing with international politics per se, right? I wanted you all to tune in and to, you know, think about community and how to navigate through the current times that we're all navigating as far as community is concerned. But there are various ways, you know, that mental health, community, and international politics connect, right? We could talk about that maybe in our class a little bit, but I don't know if Stephanie wants to add anything to that or.
Well, I would just add, personally, in my practice, we see politics playing in terms of the communities we have here and also mental health. So I would 100% agree. It plays out. It deserves more of a conversation, I know, but it does definitely affect, you know, what's happening here politically. I can attest that it is affecting mental health and communities.
Perfect. Thank you. All right. So, what if, due to COVID-19, it isn't so easy to connect with a community anymore to the point that we lose connection completely? Then we would reach out to online communities and realize that it's extremely toxic sometimes, but also good for our mental health. Is it worth to bear with the toxicity, or is it better to leave?
Well, in the question, I would examine more the feeling that it's toxic, but also good for our mental health. So I would say, on some level, perhaps that this may not be the community that someone is searching for if you're describing it as toxic. And there are a lot of different resources. They are not the same as being in person, I understand. But in terms of community, there can be some nice ways, even if you're connecting with people online that you used to connect with in person. I'm thinking of the example I gave in the talk, book club. Those are friends that I used to see in person, and now we do kind of, you know, weekly Zooms, or we do FaceTimes or things like that. So if you're feeling like a community is toxic, I would say at least, you know, look online and see if there are some other groups that you can be a part of. So you're feeling like fully it's a good place and a good fit for you, because every community is a little bit different.
Okay, thank you. Right. So, how can different communities affect a person differently?
Sure. So different communities, depending on the topics that you're coming together with, they might affect a person community or differently. I'm thinking of possibly, you know, someone connecting to a spiritual community and feeling really nourished in that aspect of their life versus, you know, someone who's maybe a part of a volunteer community and they're really nourishing and feeling like they're giving back that way. You also can have the same community affecting people differently in terms of what roles they fulfill. Even thinking of a family structure, and we all have our different roles, but they can definitely affect a person differently, just like a person's going to affect the community differently. We all have different talents and different strengths.
Okay, well, the idea of toxicity or toxic community is getting a lot of attention here. So I'm going to fuse two questions that deal in that area together, right? So, one, how would you know that you're in a toxic community? And the knock on, how would one leave a toxic community?
Yeah. So this is a topic. So how you would know, I would say it would go back to, and one of the ways, there's going to be a lot of different ways, right? If you're questioning it, I would say something may be a little off. If you're not feeling like yourself anymore, if you notice your mental health is suffering, I would say maybe something could be off. It's time to examine. And how you leave a community, very different for different communities. Sometimes it deserves a conversation and maybe it's a chance to work things out, so to speak. Sometimes it's not, depending on the issues that's happening. So I would say this is an opportunity to take care of yourself in a way that, theoretically we're also maybe taking care of the other person too, but ultimately taking care of yourself and putting your well-being first. It's not easy to leave communities.
Yeah, it isn't. Yep. So what we're changing gears here. Here's somebody who's got an athlete's background for sure. What are ways to work on mental health, especially in the world of sports?
Ooh, that's a great question. So I will say I'm not a sports psychologist, but there's a whole kind of world out there with not only athletes, but fans too. And my family included, we're very strong baseball. I'm not, but very strong baseball fans in our family. So really, if we're talking about people who are players, I think getting support, because the drive to win is very strong, and that can feel like a personal reflection of oneself. So whether you're a winner or a loser, really examining that, because that can really be internalized. And two, with fans of sports, putting it in, I would say, a perspective, healthy perspective. It's a part of your life, but it's not your entire life. But this is an interesting area. There are people who work solely with athletes in sports, and it's a very interesting area of psychology.
Thank you. All right. So this is interesting too. They're all interesting, actually. The way you put the sense of community looks like it was made from a perspective where the community also reciprocates with the individual. Since the pandemic, how do you think individuals can try to fit in a society that endorses this new way of sharing our stories through connecting?
It is interesting, the person who asked the question, I did add that in the kind of reciprocity, because I think it's an important thing to think about what we're providing as individuals to the group. And what was the second part? Since how do you think individuals can fit into a society that endorses a new way of sharing? Well, I would encourage you to think of it not necessarily as a new way. I think that, and from my perspective, I think that, looking back at my own life, we all provide something. It's just more maybe talking about it in context. So it's maybe not necessarily a way where we have to fit in, because that to me kind of means that we're conforming in some way. But really, like, how can we as individuals bring our unique strengths, and also we all have weaknesses too. So we would theoretically have other people complement our strengths as well. So rather than fit in, I would say, be accepted into communities, which is a nice way of putting it.
All right, good. So here's a more research or oriented question. What kind of research studies, articles have been done concerning community in mental health?
Yeah, there's a lot of studies. The World Health Organization is coming to mind. Community and mental health, and the importance of feeling purpose is standing out to me right now. So there was a study. It escapes me. I do not have it in front of me. Looking at specifically, I believe, the diagnosis of schizophrenia in terms of prognosis for first world countries and third world countries. And what they found was that actually, without medication in third world countries, there was a better prognosis than first world countries with medication. And the theory was that in the third world countries, you would need to still be a member of the community versus here in the United States, you might be treated more like a patient. And your job would then be to go to doctor's appointments. In third world countries, you still are an important member of the community. You're giving in some way. Maybe you're collecting water or cooking dinner or something. So that's the one that comes to mind. But if you are looking for more research, the World Health Organization is a resource. Also in the United States, we have the NAMI, the National Association of Mental Illness. I'm sure there's something, maybe the equivalent in Canada. But there's some great research out there.
Right. Moving on. Thank you. Right. How do communities aid the functioning of society?
Ooh, I think they not only aid, but they add to the functioning in every way possible. I mean, theoretically, we're all working together to do anything that gets done, right? And the better our communities function, I would argue, probably the better functioning of society, versus the more fractioned our communities are. So when we're thinking a little bit more globally, if we're all theoretically working together and harmonizing a little bit, communities can function better.
Okay. All right. Here's something, with a little bit of a shift. Why are anxiety disorders so much more common in today's era? Is it simply due to the fact that it's more socially acceptable to discuss these issues rather than mask them?
I think that's part of it. I think the other part too is we are creating, there's more opportunities to, I feel like, triggers to be anxious about. I think social media is causing an influx of anxiety. And also, a topic that we as mental health professionals, I've been a part of now, is even the fact that quarantine is happening. Will people be more anxious in social situations, or literally leaving their house afterwards, because we're so used to not only staying inside, but also the fear of what's on the news. So I think it's in part, and I would really like to say that it's more socially acceptable to discuss these issues, although I'm not sure. As a mental health professional, I talk about them all the time, but I still think probably my family and friends, and there's still that social stigma there for a lot of people, but I do think that they're on the rise for multiple reasons.
Okay, somewhat connected, I guess. How has Corona affected the mental health of the world in a general respect or general aspect?
I'll talk about kind of what I see here in Los Angeles. If there was an issue that someone was having before, it's just magnified it in a very general level. It's harder to access treatment in some respects. It's harder to feel like you're connected sometimes to the people and places you were connected to too. And isolation, if we think about, the symptoms of anxiety, depression, talking in general terms, isolation is a huge factor. So we are more isolated right now. And our news here, at least I can speak, is quite upsetting, right? We're living through a pandemic, and an election. So everything that's happening, I feel like we're just heightened. So if you were feeling, some anxiety before, it's probably heightened. Some depression before, it's probably heightened. That's general terms.
Perfect. All right. So here's a good one, about community, and some people are obviously introverts as opposed to extroverts, right? This person is asking us, an introvert is comfortable in her personal space, and they probably are used to being alone. What advice would you give to an introvert in terms of joining a community?
Yeah, I understand. I'm more introverted actually too. So find a community that speaks to you. I'll use myself as an example. I'm much more of a small group person, and having like one or two close friends versus like a huge group of people, but everybody's different. So I would say find a community that speaks to kind of what you're interested in and that you feel comfortable in. Because if we feel pressure to be someone, if I'm feeling pressure to be extroverted, it's probably not going to go very well. I'm probably going to feel anxious. So find, maybe a smaller group, maybe a group online, maybe, something around an interest. Maybe you like gardening or reading, something like that. But find something that speaks to you. And I would encourage you to not feel the pressure to join something that really doesn't.
Thank you. All right. And we have one more on the board. How can you get over having a really bad day when you expected yourself to do a lot better?
Oh, yeah. And then you're probably dealing with the disappointment too. That's when I would encourage someone to use what a therapist would call coping strategies. So maybe calling a friend or a loved one, maybe doing something really nice for yourself. This would be an opportunity to use some self-care. Maybe having a really yummy dinner and watching some TV, something that feels compassionate rather than you're kind of beating up on yourself.
Like when you said that, I thought of a spa day, right?
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
So,
absolutely.
folks, anybody else want to ask Stephanie another question? Oh, here we go. All right. What do you suggest for a person who is in multiple communities that constantly conflict with one another? Wow.
Yeah.
Mm.
Well, that's an interesting question. So without knowing a little bit more, if the person is feeling comfortable and confident in all of those communities, then perhaps exploring a little bit, if appropriate, like why it would be an issue with the communities themselves. And then it's an opportunity, of course, to look at like what we're a part of and if they still speak to us. So I would say maybe some self-examination and talking with some of the people that are in the communities if appropriate.
Okay, another theme that's coming back again is, loneliness. And so what if you're too scared to leave your community since you can't be alone or don't want to be alone, I guess? Yeah.
Yeah, that's a fair question. So perhaps it would be a time to reach out to other communities before you leave the one you're a part of. I know it's hard right now to to join new communities because of the quarantine, but it is possible. And also maybe examine and possibly doing this with another person like a therapist or a family member or a close friend, like what the fear of being alone is, because there's a difference between being alone and being lonely.
Okay. How can we cope with anxiety?
Whew. So this is a bigger question, but in terms of what you can do, depending on the type of anxiety, I use cognitive behavioral therapy for anxiety, which teaches a person to look at their negative self-talk. So if you're saying kind of negative things about yourself or negative things about the situation, we start to change that a little bit. And also introducing coping strategies. So things like perhaps there's self-care activities too. And depending on the type of anxiety, we might do kind of a graded exposure therapy. So starting to confront the things that cause anxiety. So all that together is very helpful for anxiety.
Here's an interesting one that talks a little bit about quarantine and transitioning back from quarantine. Whoever it is, I sincerely hope that we're going to get there really soon. I'm with you on this,
Yeah.
right? Because most of your teachers, and I think I speak generally, don't like teaching this way. We prefer to be with you guys in a classroom environment and have the interaction and contact, right? So the person's question is, once COVID is over and we go back to school, how can I successfully cope with anxiety if it has amplified during quarantine?
I think first, I'm thinking on personal terms too of kind of what I'm seeing with my friends and family, acknowledging that some anxiety going back into these face-to-face situations is normal. There was and there is something to be anxious about, which is an illness, and anxiety is there for a purpose. So really not shying away from the fact that the anxiety is a little amplified and still doing those activities anyway. So you might do them for a shorter amount of time. You might go outside, depending on where you are and what the rules are, go outside for a longer period of time each day. And also do things for yourself. Remember that compassion, self-compassion that I mentioned earlier. Really, this is a time of transition, and really be kind to yourself.
Okay, right. General order, career orientation again. So what advice would you give to someone who's considering studying psychology?
Yeah. Well, here there's some great opportunities to either intern, or you can work in different places without a degree in different job positions. So I would say to do that if possible. Also, something that we do quite frequently in Los Angeles, and you know, you're welcome to reach out to me too. But we sometimes, as therapists, you just get an email from a person saying, you know what, I'm thinking of becoming a therapist. Can I talk to you for 15 minutes about like schooling and what you think about this? So reach out to people. You never know who's going to email you back and say, yeah, like I'll talk to you, or yeah, I'm looking for an intern. Or so I would say be bold in just asking, and you get your questions answered that way.
Perfect. Okay, so folks, last call. If there's anybody else that has something, nothing on the board for the moment. So if you have something, type it up quickly, or else we're gonna have to thank Stephanie and wrap things up. So it's looking that way. So Stephanie, thank you very much for a very interesting, oh, maybe not, right? So here we go. Do you think the sense of community will or should change, knowing that controversial things such as the elections will affect society in general?
Ooh, the short answer is yes. Uh, um, there's always a sense of, I think that for community, an important piece is growth too. So I would hope that this would change our communities. Also, I think, at least for me personally, you know, having what's happening globally right now really amplifies the fact that we are literally all connected, much closer than we would think. So, you know, what I do impacts another person or people. So I think in that sense, with the elections, hopefully we make some changes, and that would theoretically affect communities. But yeah, I think that in general, we always aim to grow and change. And as people change, the needs of community change too.
Okay, so I think that wraps it up again. So thank you very much, Stephanie, for an informative, and it was a very interesting Q&A portion too, right? So thanks again for doing this. Thanks again for joining us. And thank you guys for attending, all right?
Thank you very much. I appreciate all the questions. And thank you for hosting.
It's a pleasure, right? So for those of you that are interested, we have the next one is at 1:00, dealing with, people in the healthcare sector through this COVID crisis and immigration and naturalization. Okay. All right. So have a good day, Stephanie. Have a good day, everybody out there. And thanks for being with us.
Thank you.
All right.